time, so I told him to handle his speech today. And this is Expo now. Paul told me, said he wasn't prepared for it. I said, prepared for what? He must give that. I came, I saw him sitting there with paper. And his face was serious. Beyond when I came in. I finally, as I was giving the announcement, it was looking like somebody who is about to die or something. Shabbat Shalom, brethren. Today I want to speak on a subject that I have titled Commitment. Commitment. And commitment is not a subject that I feel people haven't had much about. But I want to talk about it in an aspect that even I find a little bit uncomfortable. And yet, it is still a commitment, a part of commitment that is still important. Okay? In the day and age, with knowledge increasing, in this day and age, with individuality touted, in this day and age where freedom is almost worshipped, in this day and age where personal accomplishment is often pushed out as a reason to raise one's face or one's head and beat one's chest, it's a tough subject to talk about commitment to a church, commitment to a leadership, or commitment to an ideal. In an environment also where you see leaders driving people to themselves, where people work to make people dependent on them. There is someone that used to work on my vehicle that for a couple of months, I think about 2 months, has not been available. And in talking to the person this morning, I spent exactly 42 minutes on phone talking to the person. And that made me choose to speak on this subject of commitment to a degree. And one of the reasons is because I asked him what the problem was. He said he's not too well. What is the ailment? If there's some advice or whatever can be given. He said it's asthma. And I said, okay, but asthma is a condition that technically may not be fully curable, though it can be managed, and almost to an extent where it's almost you don't even feel the effect. Technically. You really technically cannot cure asthma because it has to do with the lungs, the condition of the lungs. But in certain conditions, and with medication and some change of lifestyle, asthmatic attack or the condition of asthma can be managed to a level that is almost as if the person doesn't have it. My son is half asthmatic, and managing and working with him to a level where right now he doesn't even carry Ventolin around, doesn't take salbutamol tablets, and you will rarely not even know the extent to which his lungs have been weakened as he was growing up. And again, it's often genetic. I that I'm standing here was also like that till about almost 14 years old. Any little exposure to humidity, any little exposure to dust or smoke, the only response I have to smoke and dust now is that I begin to have lots of mucus coming out. Again, it's my body response to try and prevent those things from entering my lungs, and it's producing mucus to trap the smoke, the dust, and everything like that. So asthma is a condition that can be managed. But this person said, I asked him, so where are you getting treatment? Said went to various hospitals and they said there's nothing wrong with him, that it was just the asthmatic attack. But he's been having pains on his side that's been increasing. When he's breathing, he feels pain, sharp pain here. And they told him it's just the asthmatic attack. And finally, he figured it is something that has to be dealt with from home. You know, when they tell you, go and deal with this from the house, you know what it means in Africa. And so he had to decide to go and look at what could be done. And the advice finally was given was to go to one church. This is a guy who lives in Lagos, works in Lagos. I asked him, so are you in your village now? I said, no, it's not in his village. He said he was directed to go somewhere. Where were you asked to go? He was directed to go to somewhere in Ogun State, in Elaro. And so where are you doing, where exactly are you? Are they treating you with herbs or what? He said actually he's in a church. In fact, I used the word, I'm on the mountain. And I said, what do you mean on the mountain? Olumor Rock or where? He said, Orioke, sir. You know, Orioke. And he mentioned the name of the church. And so what are they doing for you there? He said, well, he's been on the mountain for over a month and a half. And they're doing so many things, you know, for him. And I felt kind of sad. And I started talking to him. Now, what is it doing there? It's a commitment to that church, isn't it? To the leadership of that church, that they can take care of his problem and they can heal him. And I've seen people around, and similar to what I spoke about the last time, in terms of knowing where we stand with God. Where you see churches and they will spend over an hour or more, and all they're talking about is praying about their enemies. And I've had a church, one right beside my house, saying that they've started a secondary school. And they call that school, it's God's school. And everybody must bring their children, anybody who has children in secondary school, should bring their children to that school. Because it is God's school. And if they don't bring their children there, God said to them that He's going to begin to touch those children in a way that parents cannot believe. And I was listening to that guy. I felt like standing outside my balcony and carrying the microphone. I said, Oga, now which kind of voice tell you that one? And they were telling people that by the time the school is opening the following Monday, they want to see everybody here. And I want to see all these children coming there to register. Now, there is a lot of people in this day and age who push commitment to themselves, push commitment to their organization or their religious body. So to speak of commitment in the manner I want to speak about it at this time, that's why I say a little bit tough for me, okay? But it's something I still think needs to be done. All of us are part of the body of Christ. And God has called us to fellowship. He has called us to be a part of His body. And in the body of Christ, there is leadership. And there are authorities. And there is ruler. Okay? And it doesn't mean that those rulers or those with authority or the structure within the church doesn't have any power of its own. But Christ said to His disciples, especially when He was with them, and the apostles continued to extend the same principle, that he who wants to be the greatest, or he who wants to be the chief, or who wants to be the ruler among you, He said must be the servant of all. In a day and age when people tout freedom and personal independence, it becomes sometimes difficult to see people pay the proper value or respect that they need to give to that structure of rulership or ideal, or even the body of Christ. When each of us is being baptized, I believe each of us is told, you are not being baptized into a physical denomination, but into the body of Christ, which is a spiritual entity. Because the spiritual entity that constitutes the church are people who simply have the Spirit of God in them. It is not a denomination or a corporation of any human being. And yet, each of us is placed physically in this planet in a particular spiritual, physical denomination or corporation. But that does not change the fact that we are all part of a spiritual body. The tendency sometimes is people make decisions within that body of Christ as if they are accountable to no one except to God. As if that structure has no accountability to themselves except to God. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Nothing could be farther from the truth. God expects us to have commitment to Him. He expects us to have commitment to the structure, to the body of Christ, where we have been placed. He expects us to have commitment also to our leadership. Their vision, their goals, their desires, as long as it aligns with that God has put. It doesn't go against anything that God has given us. He expects us to have commitment to it. Okay? He expects us to have commitment to it. I'm going to go through a couple of scriptures to just buttress that fact, that we do have rulership and structure within the church and hierarchy, and there is authority. And that authority is part of what makes the church function the way it is. And everything it is doing, the church as a body is doing for the good of all. And there is a need for a degree of commitment that goes oftentimes beyond personal wins that actually is required for it. Let's look at a couple of scriptures, just a few of them I will mention, okay? Let's look at 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 5. 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 5. Or let me just start from verse 1, because here Paul is giving an instruction to Timothy about those who want to be having authority or rulership responsibilities within the church, leadership position. Verse 1, I'll start from verse 1. This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop or an overseer, that is someone who oversees, who directs, who leads. It says he desires a good work. And a bishop or an overseer must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. Then verse 4 says, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. What does that entail? Because the person who is going to be responsible for administering or having oversight over others ought to be able to also have oversight and be able to put his house in order. It's a logical conclusion, isn't it? That if you are going to be an overseer, that is oversight, you have leadership responsibility over people, then you have to be able to bring them into subjection as much as you are able to also do the same in your house. A man in his house, if he tells his wife, I do not want this, and the wife says, that's your cup of tea, this is what I want. After all, I'm just your wife, I'm not your slave. And the man says, okay, no problem. How can the person be having oversight over the people of God? It means there are times when somebody who has oversight must be able to make decisions that is not approved by someone, and yet in his own judgment and wisdom he feels this is necessary. And he has to be able to stand by and say this is what needs to be done. Direction. It says also having his children in submission with all reverence. Verse 5. It says if a man does not know how to rule his own house. You notice that it says, use the word how to rule his own house. Remembering always as we hear this word ruler. Jesus Christ said if you want to be the ruler or the leader or the chief or the greatest, the one with the highest authority in the body of Christ, what did he say to the disciples? He said you must be the servant of all. And they should not be like the Pharisees who exercise authority over the other one. That is, they feel because they are rulers, it gives them some measure of right to oppress. Okay? Or to just have their own way, whatever they want. And he says that's not how it's supposed to be. He said, how will he be able to take care of the church of God? How will he be able to take care of the church of God? God has placed all of us in the body of Christ, that we might all grow together, edify one another. Every activity, every program, every instance of what is put together and organized within the church of God by the leadership is for the edification of the body of Christ. We owe a form of commitment to that. When we don't, and each of us in any capacity assumes that we do not owe any allegiance or any of that, we are actually flying in the face of what God has intended. Let's read another portion of scripture. The same Timothy, 1 Timothy. Let's look at chapter 5. Chapter 5. We'll start from verse 17. It says, let the elders who rule well. What does that also imply? It means those who are elders, who are leaders, who in their leadership are leading according to established principles in the church. So let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. He's saying those who labor in the word and doctrine, who are leaders in that category, so let them be counted worthy of double honor. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. Again, my emphasis here is that there is rulership, and there's responsibility, and there's authority within the church of God. Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7. Hebrews 13, verse 7. Remember those who rule over you. Remember those who rule over you. The Greek word there could also be translated who lead you. Those who are your leaders. Who have spoken the word of God to you. Whose faith follow. What does that entail? When it says whose faith follow, it means they have some form of responsibility, and we owe to a degree, some degree of commitment to them, as long as, of course, it is after Christ. Because Paul did say in 1 Corinthians 11:1, be imitators of me as I imitate Christ. Who have spoken the word of God to you, whose faith follow, considering the outcome of their conduct. Verse 17. Again, specifically outlining that commitment again, because that's what it is. Obey those who rule over you, and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that will be unprofitable to you. This places a degree of responsibility on those who are leaders to look out for the edification and the growth of those whom they are leading, isn't it? In an environment, in an era, in a culture, or in a generation where individuals believe they are totally accountable to themselves and no one else. This flies in the face of what we are reading here. It says, obey those who rule over you and be submissive. For they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that will be unprofitable to you. As I said, this is pretty hard for me to talk about, but I think it still needs to be talked about. And I will give you some ways and some examples from scripture on how God blesses those who show commitment to where God has placed them. And that commitment comes in what we do. It comes in what we do. They say in Yoruba, one lebo. There are little things that we do that also actually constitutes either a lack of commitment or could constitute non-submission or frank disrespect to the leadership or the authority that God has placed in the church. Each of us who work in an office, right? How many people here were conscripted and drafted to the place where they work? That is, you just received a letter and you didn't apply. You were just on your own and the letter just came to you and says, Mr. XYZ or Miss ABC or Miss XYZ, starting from Monday, you are required to resume work in so bank or so office on a salary of so and so between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock. How many people ever had that happen to them? Unless you work in the army, unless you're an army person. And even in the army, during wartime, is the only time they conscript people. During wartime, anybody 18 to 40, they'll just send you a letter. You've been drafted to appear and come and sign up for service. Before wartime, when there's no wartime in peacetime, people will volunteer and go and join the army. For those who work in the office and those who are in the office, how many of you who are here will be sick at home and just stay home and not connect with your office? To say, you know, I'm not feeling too well, so I'm not coming to the office today. How many people will do that? I doubt nobody does that. You know why we do that? We recognize that my boss has some measure of authority over me. He also is, I get some benefit from it. If I do not report as to why I'm not in the office, I may get a query, I may get sacked. How many people will get miffed? How many people will get upset? If 2 weeks or a week or 3 days, when you have not appeared to the office, your boss doesn't call you and say, oh boy, we didn't see you in the office, so what happened for 3 days? Hey, so you are... How many people get upset that the boss didn't call them? 3 days, 4 days, they have not appeared to the office. Nobody. But you know we do that in the church, easily. Some people will not turn up for a week. I try to tell myself sometimes, really none of my business. But that's not the truth. For each person I do not see, I wonder, and I hope all things are okay. There are times when out of the way I respond to it, because you have to sometimes deal with certain things. Number one, nobody's coming to church on my account, right? We all do it because we're doing it for God. God says 7 days is the day of rest. You honor it by remembering the Sabbath day. And then He commanded the second part of the Sabbath is a holy convocation. And so we all do it for God, easily. I tell myself the same principle why I don't go around and meet individuals and say, you, it's end of the month, have you paid your tithe? Because it's personal. The same individual, the same reason I tell myself, if somebody is not at church, I cannot go and ask you, why didn't you come to church today? When I ask, I'm asking out of concern. And I think it got to a point, a couple of years, I decided not to be asking, unless it gets to maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then I'll ask, we didn't see you last week. And the reason is because, purely of concern. I also don't want people to assume, oh, because I didn't come last week, that's why he's asking. If I don't come today, this week too, they'll be asking me and looking at me somehow. Absolutely not. We need to all understand our responsibility and relationship and need to build the relationship with God directly. For whatever is not of faith, the Bible says is what? Is sin. Again, verse 24 of Hebrews 13. Greet all those who rule over you, and all the saints, those from Italy greet you. Again, that there is a measure of rulership and authority. And part of responsibility or being responsive to them is simply giving the little courses that is often needed to give them. Let me go a little bit into the degree of commitment and how God blesses people who show commitment to the leader, to the ideal of Him, and also how personally it helps that body to grow. And I will use the number of examples I can use, but I think the one I can use the most, that is the most poignant here, is the example of David. David's reign is described as the golden years in Israel's history. David. Let's read 1 Samuel 22. Take the story from there. 1 Samuel 22. The time wasn't an ideal time at all. It wasn't a time of enjoyment. It wasn't a conducive, convenient environment, okay? In the life of Israel as a nation or David as an individual. David's commitment to Israel, his commitment to God, his commitment to the people of Israel is legendary, of course. And at this point in his life, after having risked his life to face Goliath, gone and be joining to be fighting against the enemies of Israel and winning victories for Israel, he was accused of ambition. Saul was jealous because it looks as if God is with him and God has left him, and he started plotting his downfall. At this point, David could not even live in his father's house. And he was a fugitive that was living in a cave. So it wasn't a conducive environment for David. It wasn't a conducive time for him. It was a time of distress, personal distress, His life was constantly at stake. This is what happened around that period. Verse 22, chapter 22 from verse 1. David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So he escaped to the cave of Adullam. He's living in a cave, a dark, dreary cave. When his brothers and all his father's house heard of it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, and this is very strange. This is a guy who was in a situation by himself that was not so ideal. And of course, the scripture says the people who gravitated to him, they were people who were in distress. Everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontent, people who had one form of problem or the other, people who weren't happy with the situation in the environment, people who maybe too much tax, maybe they have oppressed them, abused them, people who had issues gathered to David. And he became captain over them. The word is, he became their ruler, their leader. The Bible says there were about 400 men with him. Why did people gather around David? It didn't look as if because he had everything going for him. And all these distressed people who are in debt, people who are discontent, felt that if they come to David, he has things to hand out to them. So why did they do so? Again, it's a lesson that is repeatedly clear over the years in history. Every time there is trouble, there is problem, or there is need, or there is some form of issues around, people gravitate not towards necessarily somebody who can solve their problem. They gravitate towards somebody who can give them hope. Because it's hope that makes people believe that problem can be solved. How do I know that? Psalm 13. Let's turn there. It is by conjecture, when you look at the life of David, that you can conclude somehow that this psalm was probably written during the time when David was running from Saul. Because in the life of David, how many times in the life of David was he in a situation where he was in despair? The time he was running from Saul, and the time he was running from Absalom. What other time in his life? Was he in a situation where it looks as if God has abandoned him, or he was running for his life? And even scholars are of different opinion as per when this Psalm 13 was written. There are some that is written there, that this was written at a particular time, like Psalm 51, okay? And there were some that were written without saying exactly where. But we can look at his life and figure this must be around that time. So around the time he was probably being hunted by Saul, in the cave of Adullam where he was living, because he was a fugitive running from cave to cave until Saul died and he entered Jerusalem and became the king. Let's look at Psalm 13. This is the words of someone who is in distress, okay? And this was why people came towards him. And there was that level of commitment to him. It says, trust in the Lord. Trust in the salvation of the Lord is the title of this particular something. To the chief musician, a psalm of David. So, verse 1. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God, enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed against me. Let those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. This is David who was facing difficulty. A time when it looks as if God had abandoned him. A time when it looks as if God was so far away. And many of us might find ourselves in that situation at various times in our life. That it looks as if we have no one, none that cares about us. And God is so far away and as if we're alone. As if the whole world is coming crashing down upon us. And we have nothing and no one to depend on. What stood David out and that attracted people to him? That later on you find out The Bible calls them mighty men. History recorded that those men, 37 of them, even though there were 400 who came to him, but there were 37 unique ones. The Jews call them the Ha-Giborim, the mighty men of valor, or the mighty men of David. Those 37 men were instrumental in getting David the rulership that expanded all over Palestine. And he became the king that brought the Israel's golden years. 50 years of rule that was unprecedented. Verse 5 and 6 tells us what is unique about David. But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. This looks like a contradiction in terms, isn't it? In one breath, he is lamenting that it looks as if God has abandoned him. He was asking God why God is not answering his prayers. Deliver me from my enemies. Solve my problem. Why are you not listening to me? You want me to just continue like this and die, so that my enemies or those who chase me or those who want to kill me can say they have been able to win or what? God, why are you doing this to me? But how did it end up? Like it says at the time when they went on a campaign, they came back and all their people, the brook Bessor, right? That Bible says David encouraged himself in the Lord. David had an ability to encourage himself, no matter what. He always ends up coming out in the end positive. He always ends up coming out and encouraging himself. And people gravitated to him because of that. He gives people hope that is not lost. Well, it might look as if everything is what? Falling apart. But do not worry. God is there for you. David is a self-encourager. David is somebody who motivates himself. He doesn't stay in the depressed state. He learned how to raise himself and motivate himself. And he passed that motivation to those around him. In David's distress, as people come to him, he begins to look to solve their problem. He begins to use his music, his words. He begins to use the words of God to encourage them, to motivate them, to inspire them. And he got commitment from people to not himself, but to God. Remember the time when he was in a cave, and Saul came to sleep in the same cave. And the men of David told David, God has given your enemy into your hands. But look at what David said to them. Far be it from me to use my hand to strike the Lord's anointed. David wasn't in this for himself. David's focus was on God, on God's will. And he directed his people to God. And he led them to God. But most importantly, David was always able to generate strong commitment from his followers. They were devoted to him. Let's see how devoted they were. And the reason why that is important to us. If you turn to Micah, turn to Micah. Chapter 1. Read verse 15. Micah chapter 1 verse 15. It says, remember that the cave where David and his men hid was called Adullam, right? Verse 15 says, I will yet bring an heir to you, O inhabitants of Maresha, and the glory of Israel shall come to Adullam. The glory of Israel shall come to Adullam. Adullam is that cave. Adullam is that cave. Why did God say that the glory of Israel shall come to Adullam. Perhaps, maybe we will know from here. Let me read to you some of the things that were unique about David's men. What was also unique about Adullam? Let's turn to 1 Kings or 1 Samuel 17. Let's start 1 Samuel 17 and read from verse 2. 1 Samuel 17 from verse 2. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they camped in the valley of Elah. In the valley of Elah. And drew up in battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. Adullam is in the valley of Elah. Adullam is in the valley of Elah. And that's exactly where David killed Goliath. David killed Goliath in the valley of Elah, right in front of that cave. David facing Goliath shows two things. One, David's devotion to God, his commitment to defend one, God, and the honor of Israel. Because when he faced Goliath, David faced Goliath by saying, who is this Philistine that dares to challenge the armies of the living God? Is there anybody who is not around to come and remove this man's head, who is spewing such nonsense on the armies of God? His commitment to the things of God was total. In that same valley, he hid in a cave. Discontented men came towards him. And see what those men did. Turn your Bible again to look at what these so-called discontented men did. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 16. 1 Chronicles 12, 16. Some of the sons of Benjamin and Judah came to David at the stronghold. David went out to meet them and said to them, if you have come peaceably to me to help me, my heart will be united with you. I will give you my commitment. I will give my everything to you. But if it's to betray me to my enemies, since there is no wrong in my hands, may the God of our fathers look and bring judgment. And then the spirit came upon Amasai. I bet it's not a spirit of anything except the spirit of God. Chief of the captains, and he said, we are yours, O David. A commitment to David. We are on your side, O son of Jesse. Peace, peace to you, peace to your helpers, for your God helps you. Because they were sure God was with David. David's plan was God's plan. They were committed to David. And they were committed to work with him. There wasn't any. We're here to make sure we protect ourselves from our enemies. They came to the stronghold where David was, and they pledged their allegiance to David. I doubt any one of those who are in that place with David. When David says, okay, let us go to this place and go and do this, and somebody says, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not coming. I'm just here with you guys so that we can be here together, because it's not safe for me there. But you know what? I make my own decisions. I look after my own family. How long do you think a family will stand? Or a unit will stand? If individuals within the unit begin to think they are independent and not committed to the unit. they will not stand. It cannot stand. It doesn't work like that. Okay, let's look at the degree of commitment that these men of David gave to him that made God choose to bless them. 2 Samuel 23. 2 Samuel 23. And this is fairly long, and we're going to read it. And I'm going to start from verse 8. Remember this storyline. David was a fugitive who was hiding in a cave. His commitment to Israel to deliver them from the enemies was strong. People knew it. And he was in a situation that was not enviable, and yet people gravitated to him. He was someone who has a habit of inspiring hope in people, who can strengthen and encourage people to go beyond themselves. And so all these people came towards him, and they pledged their fealty to David. They pledged their loyalty to David, and of course by extension his vision, his plan. I do not believe in that group of David someone will choose to go out on a mission of their own, and David by courtesy will not be aware. These are the names of the mighty men who David had. You see the level of loyalty and level of commitment these men had to David. They were not small men. That's what I'm trying to point out by bringing this thing out. They were not insignificant. They were men who could stand on their feet and say, you know what, David, you killed Goliath. You might be considered a mighty man. Hey, so what? I'm also a mighty guy. You know? Or they can say, David, you have a Rolls Royce. So what? I have a Pajero. They were men who, by their own rights, they were accomplished. Let's look at these mighty men. These are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Josheb-Bashebeth, the Tacomonite, or the Tachmonite, chief among the captains. It was called Adino, the Eznite, because he had killed 800 men at one time. So it's not as if they are afraid of David. It's not as if they were cowering with David. But they were devoted to David, committed to David. In that environment where David was, they cannot make forays on their own without giving that honor to David, of letting him know what they're doing. Doesn't mean they can't have plans. Of course they can. Adino had killed 800 men at one time. And after him was Eleazar, the son of, not Plantano, Dodo, the Ahohite. That does not mean he's always saying aho, aho, aho. One of the three mighty men with David went to defy the Philistines who had gathered there for battle, and the men of Israel had retreated. He arose and attacked the Philistines until his hand was weary and his hand stuck to the sword. He had a sword in his hand. They said the men of Israel ran. He stood. And there were two others who were there with him, and he was in front. And he kept fighting and fighting until his determination was so strong to hold on to his sword and fight that his hand locked into position. Even though he was so tired, he could almost not carry the sword. His hand locked into the sword. I've told you the story of Peter Thurbush, 21-year-old guy, who was belaying for his friend in Yosemite, New York, when they were climbing. And he was on the ground holding the belay rope. And his friend was on the rope. And then there was an earthquake, a tremor. And boulders, huge rocks, the size of box trains, were coming down from the top of the Yosemite mountain. I think it was in 1989 or so. And all the people on the ground with him, of course, they ran. When you are doing rock climbing, the person belaying has a rope. The rope is attached to his harness. There's an ATC connected to it. The rope goes up to a hook on the top. And the other part of the rope is connected to the person climbing, the person's harness. So if the person should slip and fall, the belayer will just lock his hand, and the person falling will be suspended on the rope, and he can get back to climbing. And Peter Thurbush, 21 years old, was belaying his friend. And the tremor started throwing rocks from the top. Everybody ran away. if Peter Chebush had left the rope, unhooked his harness, he would have lived. But then his friend on the rope, who he was the one supposed to anchor him, will drop and die. It was his job to keep him anchored. And Peter Chebush stood his ground. The friend on the rope, on the rock, could only try to flatten himself so that the rocks falling would not hit him. He just tried to flatten and hope they won't touch him. That wouldn't have saved him. Because if Peter Chebush had left the rope, he would just come plummeting down. That's his death. But Peter Chebush knew the moment he decided to stay as the belayer, that guy's life was in his hand. And he stood his ground, 21 years old. And the guy was flattened by the rocks coming down. He died. There's a monument to Peter Chebush in Yosemite today in New York. Not only did he die, his determination to hold to that rope was so strong, even at death. You know, when people die, their bodies relax. At death, Peter Chebush's hand was still like this. When they came, they had to use pliers to open his hand to release the rope so that they could bring down his friend. He died, but his hand was locked to that rope. That's the power of mind over the physical. Autonomous nervous system. That is why some of us, when you hold something hot that has food in it, you don't leave it immediately. You manage and manage until you can put it down. Whereas if it's ordinary metal, you just hold, you leave it immediately. The mind overrides the physical body. This man also, when he was fighting the Philistines, the scripture says Eleazar's hand stuck to his sword, so it would not drop from his hand. And he fought until the Philistines ran away. Then there was Shammah, the son of Agi. You know what Agi means? Agi means fugitive. Someone who is a fugitive. Someone who is a running away person. Who is being chased like an escaped convict. He stood his ground and refused to be a fugitive. What did Agi do? The Philistines had gathered together into a troop, where there was a piece of ground full of beans, lentils. And the people fled. People ran. But he stationed himself in the middle of the field and defended it and killed the Philistines. And the Lord brought a great victory. These were people who showed commitment to an ideal, to a leader, to a group, to their people. And God made them mighty men. They were referred to in various portions of scripture as mighty men. They were not men who looked to themselves. Their exploits were because of their commitment to something greater, to someone who leads them, to a group of people that belong to God. Then 3 of the 30 chief men went down at harvest time and came to David at the camp of Adullam. And the troop of Philistines encamped in the valley of Rephaim. Look at what David said. To show you again the level of commitment and loyalty they had to him. David was then in the stronghold, in the cave. And the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem, some distance away. And David, he was just talking. He was just talking just speaking. And he said, oh, that someone will give me a drink of the water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate. Bethlehem was encamped by enemies. It's like to say, I wish somebody would just, I wish somebody would offer to stay in the church office to help us clean this place tomorrow. We probably will have to, anyway, which is by the gate. David just spoke whimsical, just a whimsical statement. Look, they just had him, he wasn't saying, I want to, he was just speaking whimsically. This shows the degree of commitment and loyalty they had to David, to the people, to the ideal. The 3 mighty men, they broke through the camp of the Philistines and they drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate. They took it and they brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink it, but poured it out to the Lord. He said, what? I was just talking kind of. It's like saying, I wish that we will. Maybe David was just thinking that, I wish I had enough power, enough men to go and destroy all those Philistines and have Jerusalem free, Bethlehem free. And then at least we can be drinking water from that place rather than. And those men just had it, and 3 of them risked their life, and they went and they killed as many Philistines, and they took water from the well to bring it to David. This is commitment that goes beyond their own personal thing. David didn't drink it. 18. Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of another 3. He lifted his spear against 300 men and killed them, and won a name among them, among these 3. Was he not the most honored of 3? Therefore he became their captain. However, he did not attain to the first 3. He did not want to be the head, did not want to be the first, but they made him so. So these are men who had accomplishments on their own. They had status on their own, in their own right. It never affected them to the point where they could not be committed to David, to his kingdom, to his fights, to his battle. History records that those men, 37 of them, the mighty men of David, the Giborim, were responsible for David, helping David conquer most of that land. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who had done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. These were accomplished men on their own. And yet, it wasn't a big deal for them to show commitment. And he killed an Egyptian, a spectacular man. Maybe it's a huge, when they say spectacular, it's a huge, big, strong person. Not ordinary. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, and he went to him with a staff, wrested the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. These things Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, did, and won a name among 3 mighty men. He was more honored than the 30, but he did not attain to the first 3. And David appointed him over his guard. Asahel, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. Elhanan, the son of Dodo of Bethlehem. Shammah, the Harodite. Elika, the Harodite. Helez, the Paltite. Ira, the son of Ikesh, the Tekoite. Abiezer, the Anatohite. And began to list all of them. Verse 39 says, and Uriah, the Hittites. 37 in all. Look at the meaning of their names, even. Look at the meaning of their names. Benaiah means built up by God. Eleazar means God has helped me. Eliam, God's people. Elhanan, whom God has graciously given something. Asahel, made by God. Eliphelet, God is deliverance. Uriah, the Lord is my might. Abishai, desirous of a gift. Shammah was the son of, as I said, Agi, which means fugitive. My point is this. David was a man who had accomplished things, yes. But David was a man who has ability to encourage and motivate himself. If there's an attack on the church of God today, we need people like David who will not think of themselves, who will not think of their own selves first, but they'll think of the people. And they'll be committed to this church of God. And they will encourage themselves, irrespective of whatever personal demons they may be fighting, irrespective of whatever personal trials, tragedy, issues that will be in their life. They have enough of the Word of God in them to encourage themselves in God and to give those same encouragement to others, to inspire others to have hope. And you begin to hope that others will gravitate around them. And the commitment will be such that they will go out and do exploits for the church, for the people. We need to develop commitment to one another. We need to develop commitment to the body of Christ where God has placed us. Commitment to the leadership, to the goals, to the vision, to the ideals, and all the programs of the church. God hasn't called us to ourselves. He has called us to a body. The scripture says anybody who loses mother, father, son, house, or anything for his sake, Scripture says they will gain it 100-fold. How can they gain it? If you and I are willing to be, if I'm supposed to be a father to someone, and I'm unwilling to be, if I'm supposed to be a brother to someone, and I'm unwilling to be, if I'm supposed to be a son to someone, and I'm unwilling to be, our commitment to one another must be higher than this. It must be such that we are willing to put our lives on the line for one another. That level of commitment is what God expects of us. It goes beyond commitment to ourselves, to our ideals. It's commitment to the structure, to the leadership, to the church, to the people that God has brought us into. Shabbat Shalom.